Hey, what's up guys? This is Jimmy from CBD Sutra, and straight off the bat, this video is actually for all those e-commerce brand owners who are trying to figure out what should be the best strategies to advertise online. Who should they really listen to? What exactly is going on with their e-commerce business? Because right now on our podcast today, we have a really wonderful guest, a really good friend of mine who's been working in the agency space, correct me if I'm wrong, for the last 10 years, right? And
yeah, we'll call it 10 to 12, but somewhere around
of course, man. Yep. And recently also launched his own mushroom gummies brand. So we're going to actually see from a point of view of an agency owner who actually knows it all, right? He worked with multiple brands in depth, did his research, launched a brand, and now how he's feeling while managing a brand. So again, because I keep hearing these two perspectives from these two different positions, like every agency owner wants to be a brand owner and every brand owner wants to be an agency owner because they all see their each other's plate and see, who's full and who's not, right? So this is the dilemma we're going to clear today because we have the guest who is actually managing both of the businesses right now, working with brands while managing his own brand. So we're going to really listen to what he's going to say, and he's going to really pour his heart out too. He's going to spill all the tea, spill all the secrets. So make sure that you stay in for next 30 to 50 minutes. We're going to take enough time to answer each and every single question that you might be having at your desk. And yeah, I think this is more than enough info to actually hook you in for the next 30 to 50 minutes, right? Please give a warm welcome to our guest today, Tyler, founder of SFL e-commerce and recently launched his own mushroom brand. So Tyler, take your stage. Please introduce yourself, in terms of how did your early childhood look like? How did agency thing happen, marketing happen to you? And what was the pivotal moment where you thought of starting an agency and also while working within an agency, running your own brand? Stage is all yours.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the introduction for sure. And so, just to kind of get into a little bit of my background and how that might have led me to, kind of finding myself in the position that I'm in today. Even from the time I was little, I've always been somebody who's, I was smart. I did well enough in school to kind of stay out of trouble and keep my parents off my back. But at the end of the day, it wasn't really what drove me or what interested me. I was always much more interested in kind of doing my own thing. I've always felt very comfortable not being in control of my own time or, having to be in a certain place at a certain time. So I think from the moment I was in high school, I was already kind of starting to figure out what more of an entrepreneurial route would look like for me, something that would kind of, give me the freedom to travel, give me the freedom to be able to, spend more time with my family and friends and things like that. Just live a more, fulfilling lifestyle than what we traditionally maybe see our parents or older generations kind of get stuck in with the, the traditional kind of corporate style and grind. So one of the first decisions I made that kind of led me, I guess, into that territory was to leave Dallas-Fort Worth, where I was born and raised, for college and go to Florida International University in Miami and pursue a degree in marketing and international business. At that time, I had no idea what I was going to do after school. I think all the way up until the day I graduated college, I didn't really have any idea what I was going to do after school. But I knew that it would kind of be more so in that path of business and entrepreneurship. So throughout college, just wanted to kind of absorb as much foundational information as I could to be able to make those decisions later on and kind of, choose a more specific path. And to be honest, I think a lot of people in our situation, at least in the States, would say that they didn't learn anything about digital marketing and e-commerce in school. I mean, the biggest ad channels and platforms and technologies, everything like that really came out after I graduated college in 2015. So like I said, it was more about gaining that foundational knowledge of accounting and basic business principles and leadership and things like that. And then, kind of using those once I graduated to say, okay, I think this path is probably the more specific direction I want to go. I was exposed to digital marketing through something that I had kind of started doing in college with a friend, which was throwing events locally in Miami. So we did everything from corporate events to bringing in, musical artists and guests and setting up concerts, booking out venues and everything like that. So on one side, that was my first taste of actually managing a business, having to deal with expenses and, people and hiring and all that kind of stuff. But also in promoting those events and trying to sell tickets and build the brand. That's where I was first kind of exposed to the power of these digital channels, the ability to track everything and know where your dollar's going, know where to double down and all those types of things. And in doing so for that events company, it became very apparent and very obvious to me from an early stage that this digital marketing thing is going to be huge. If you can master this and you can, learn the psychology of it and get people to take certain actions and buy certain things online, you can apply that to almost anything in life. And that's one of the biggest tools that I think an entrepreneur can have is the marketing. Because if you have the ability to generate sales, generate awareness, you can always kind of find a role for yourself. You can pull together the other resources to be able to make something happen. So when I graduated, again, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. What I did kind of initially is put myself out there as a freelancer. So I spent probably 6 to 8 months after graduating college, just doing as many certifications and online courses and things as I could, just getting exposed to all these different channels in digital marketing. Back around that time, I think you can agree, most people chose to kind of expertise in one area or another. Back then, it was much more common for someone to just do Facebook ads or just do email marketing or just do development. But I think I was lucky to kind of get that shotgun approach initially where I was exposed to everything. And I kind of early on developed the perspective that I think having an understanding of all angles and all channels is going to be more beneficial than just specializing, at least when it comes to, later on when I might try to launch my own brands and stuff. So I kind of kept that mindset moving forward and tried to, at least have a good understanding of all different areas of digital marketing, whether it be SEO or paid ads or development or design. And then, some of the more, I guess, impactful channels is what I really spent the majority of my attention learning, which would be, in my opinion, the paid ads and stuff like that. So I did that for probably a year or two, just kind of freelancing, making sure that, and really the clients that I was freelancing for me was just an opportunity to say, okay, let's take this thing that I learned in this course and get it to stick by actually applying it to a real life scenario. So, you can watch YouTube videos about email automations all day long, but until you go to actually build them out and understand what works for a specific brand or product and things like that, it's not really going to stick and be something that you can utilize at any given point. So the freelancing was, like I said, more of an opportunity to apply those skills and really get them to stick, master them, and build the confidence to then go get a full, paid position at an agency or internally with a brand. Right. So at that point, about, a year and a half, 2 years of freelancing, I felt comfortable going into an interview for like an account manager position at an agency and getting through that interview and getting the position. So that's kind of what I started looking for was, okay, now I have these skills. If I want to take it to the next level, I need to work with bigger budgets. I need to work with more high profile brands that are trying to do bigger things. So, my thought process was, in order to do that, let me work with an agency. So I ended up getting on with an agency out of Miami called TFD Marketing that does great work. I think you've actually worked with them a little bit as well. And a lot of my, current colleagues and employees are actually former employees at TFC as well. So we've all kind of stayed tight. I'm very tight with the owners, Jeff and Will, from TFC still. So that was a great experience for me and really accomplished everything that I wanted it to accomplish, in the sense that it propelled me to that next level. It exposed me to what that next level of strategy and implementation really looks like, and kind of what the expectations of these higher profile clients are. So ended up doing that for a while, found myself in a position, a couple of years down the road at TFC where I was directing a lot of the strategy for, anywhere from 15 to 20 brands at a time. During that same time, we actually launched an internal project, which was a publishing company that kind of served as a audience building, system for some of the clients that we're working with. So for example, we launched a nutrition site, a fitness site, a women's health site, and, building email lists, using those as educational landing pages for ad campaigns, stuff like that. So that was kind of my first taste of building a new business or brand within a business, and kind of, being in control of those growth projections and onboarding the clients and designing the operations of the agency itself, rather than just working on the execution of the marketing. So through that experience, I was able to get another position, which is actually where I met you for the first time, which is out of, Voight Media in New York. Also great team, great guys. I think both of us would speak very highly of, the team over there and everybody that we worked with. Through that experience, that's where I really started to look at myself and say, okay, in this role, I'm doing pretty much everything that I would be doing if I was managing my own agency. I'm doing the hiring, I'm doing the training. I'm now heavily involved with the prospecting and the onboarding of clients and the creating of the packages and everything else. I'm just not reaping the rewards of owning my own business. So it kind of became clear pretty quickly that that was the route that I wanted to go, and that I wanted to try to launch my own agency, but to do things a little bit differently. And what I meant by that was, in both scenarios at TFC and at Voy, I think they kind of found themselves, like we spoke about before, specializing a little bit too much, in my opinion, for the modern needs of an e-commerce brand. So, at Voy, it was very heavily focused on paid media. And then, me, from having some of that previous experience, I already knew how important some of the back-end operations, like the email automations, the SMS, the conversion rate optimization, the landing pages, all of that go into the performance of the paid media. So when I opened SFL e-commerce as my own agency, I wanted to approach it as a much more omni-channel growth partner. So, we're not your paid media company. We're not your CRO agency. We're not your development team. We're your e-commerce growth partner. And what that means and what that usually translates and looks like in real time is, when we're onboarding a client, we're taking a holistic approach and assessment of what they need to grow their brand. Maybe for this brand, paid ads isn't the best thing, or maybe, the best thing for them is like an aggressive TikTok affiliate program, and going after organic content for creators and pushing on that. Just depending on the situation, the budget, the product itself, the audience that it pertains to, all of those types of things. So I wanted the freedom when onboarding these clients, not to just say, okay, well, we do paid ads, so we're going to tell you do paid ads. I wanted to be able to actually come up with a holistic strategy that was specifically designed to grow that client and fulfill the services that were needed, not fulfill the ones that weren't, and not get overwhelmed with, things that I don't consider priority to grow the store. So for example, I've always told clients kind of from day one, like, one thing we're probably never going to do for you is like your organic social media posts, unless we're going to go to the level of like, all right, this is an actual growth strategy. We have lead magnets in our link in bio. We're using many chat agents to drive into the, if we're not taking it to that extent, I'm not here to just be a person that posts on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's not going to do anything for us. Let me focus on these things that we all agreed are going to grow your store to the next level. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken as an agency. And I think the next evolution of that is very natural, and one that a lot of agency owners constantly think about, which is launching your own brand, right? Same way that I was kind of in my previous position, looking around saying, I'm kind of doing everything that I would already need to do my own agency. When you're owning an agency and doing all the marketing, especially from a holistic approach with all these brands, you start to think, okay, why wouldn't I just launch my own brand and be my own client and really have the freedom to implement everything that I want to try and all these different strategies and tests and things like that. So that's kind of how we got to the point of, all right, let's launch our own brand. And the only issue for us was capital at that point. I already had pretty good connections in manufacturing. I had pretty good, connections in fulfillment, and we can kind of get further into how we set all that up later on. But that was just kind of, like I said, the most natural evolution of our next step as an agency was to start launching our own projects that we would manage and own.
Yeah, that was like too intense and too in-depthful, right? Of course, because again, I can relate to major of the portion that you actually explained away, like how you started out in college and what was your entrepreneurial spirit. You started out working in the projects. I have a similar story, right? Because when I just graduated my high school, I wanted to work with my father. That was the whole goal, right? Because my father owns a really big trucking company. We have a fleet of trucks. And most of their business was actually coming from referrals, because it was like a 20-year-old company. So no marketing channels involved, nothing else. I went over there. On the first day itself, what I did was the very basic thing, setting up a Google business account. A Google business account where you can actually at least find the business on Google, right? You can see the directions, the website, at least a calling number. My dad never even had this kind of stuff. Once I did the setup, and we always this was a mentality I had, like, if you do something, at least wait for some results to come in before proceeding with every other strategy. Otherwise, you start compiling the strategy one over the other, and you never really find out what was the initial effort that you put in, which is actually reaping the results, right? This is more like something A/B test that we always do with the brands, right? We set up the Google business account, leads started coming in. Second thing I did was the very simple Google Ads campaign of actually straight away, people see the Google Ads of, hey, trucks available. If you want your freight to be moved, call over here. My father started receiving calls, and that's how the business grew. Me at 17 doing all this kind of stuff was my first step towards, again, finding out that, hey, digital marketing is like the next big thing which is going to happen. Back in 2017, when I was actually 17 years old, right? I'm 24 right now. It's been like 7-8 years working in the digital space. Then again, figuring out like what to do next, how to make money, because I only worked with my father for 3 months. My father is like, I won't say my father is arrogant, but he has this specific attitude of, I can't really learn something from them. I think most of the people who are working with their parents can actually say the same thing, right? When you work with a father or you work in a generational business, you can't really learn much because your father never really learned how to teach. I hope you can agree with me over here.
Yeah, of course.
So again, this is something I found very obnoxious at that time. I was like, hey, I can't work over this. I need to figure out something else on my own. Then started figuring out the internet space, started my first e-commerce store in POD business. I think I lost about 4 to 5 lakhs in Indian rupees, which is close to $3,000 to $5,000 at that time. All the savings I ever had was lost. Then I started my own internships and going to jobs because now I realize the importance of really working under someone and learning their skills similar to you. Right. I learned things hard way. I make mistakes. Something really huge, they lost losing $3,000 to $5,000 as an 18-year-old kid while working in college, while going to college, right? So that was the first, learning that I took was, to really learn and avoid the mistakes that people have already avoided, right? Learn from other people's mistake. Started learning into the job, started doing internships and figuring really out what are the paid ads actually. Started learning Facebook ads at the age of 18, still doing the same. It's the bread and butter of any business that you can actually think of. And I think you over here had a similar kind of experience, right? So now, again, you also mentioned that we work in both of the similar agencies. And we can actually say that I think we work with some of the biggest brands that we can even name here. We work with Lacoste. I think you were on the Lacoste team, right? Spa.com, Purity Products, some of the biggest brands, spending about 6 figures a month. And we managing those brands sitting in our chairs from our home. Again, that's what makes the digital marketing beautiful, right? Otherwise, you can see most of the businesses are actually struggling right now who don't understand the marketing aspect. And this is where we actually learned, again, the true essence of putting in the money and getting the money back. For every $1 you put in, you get $3 to $4 back out of advertising. And that's what really fascinated both of us to start our own agencies, to work for ourselves, work for the brands, and again, start working on our own brands too. So now you are working with an agency, I worked with an agency. You are actually owning your agency, I'm owning my agency. We two agency owners are sitting right across each other. Let's try to brainstorm. Now, this specific part of Q&A is going to be for the e-commerce brand owners who are actually trying to figure out that, hey, what kind of agencies we should work with? How exactly you should work with an agency? What kind of common mistakes they make? And we as agency owners, what do we have in our mind? Because always our best intentions is to grow our business, grow our revenue, grow the client's revenue, and also we have to pay for the team that we hire. Again, we agency owners are pretty much responsible for 2 different parties that we're managing right now. First party is the client itself, their revenue, and the team that they have hired. The second party is ourselves. We have to pay ourselves. We have to pay for our family, and also the team that we are managing, and the team is also going to be paying for their families, right? So if you just pause for a moment and actually think about it, it's so beautiful that we make a connection of this whole money chain. And because of us, different businesses, different families are actually having a good time, right?
Just to quickly touch on that,
yeah.
I always tell people that's probably one of my favorite parts about this business is when something goes really well and you see wow, not to sound arrogant, but I just,
right,
that was doing $30,000 a month 6 months ago is now doing $250,000 a month. It's changed their lives for the better. We just changed lives and they can, trickle that down to their families, like you said. So I definitely love that aspect.
Of course, man. That's what makes the agency business beautiful. Again, every single business has its pros and cons. As agency business is rewarding cash flow wise, at the same time, it takes a good amount of your time away from you because all the space, it's been involved with managing the brand, managing your team, managing your whole aspect of accounting, finances and stuff. You are the one sim person having a war with all the aspects related to your life, right? So yeah, let's start this Q&A for e-commerce brand owners. I think it's going to be really helpful for them. Let's try to pour our hearts into it. Let's start with the first question that every single brand owner would be having in the mind, because while working with the specialized agencies, because once you work with the generic agencies, it's they are managing all the brands, and it's not when you always manage different aspects of the brands, you know everything. Once you go towards a specialization of at least going into some industry-wise specialization, it makes the magic happen. Right. So you as an agency owner, I think you're also working with majority of health and wellness brands, right?
Correct.
does this question come to you often that you are managing all the brands in the health and wellness industry? All the brands are very much similar to each other. Their product is similar to each other, positioning and stuff. So how do you really handle the conflict of interest if this happens? And how do you uniquely position each brand so that it stays separate? So the ads concepts don't overlap with each other, and again, their strategies don't overlap with each other, and the brand should not feel like, hey, my data is being used to benefit another brand, right? So this is the question that comes to most of the brand owners. So I just want you to really address this out. How do you manage all this stuff within your agency?
Yeah, so I mean, I would start by saying, I think from the perspective of a brand owner, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one side, like you said, maybe you're worried about the fact that, if they discover something working with my brand, they may use that same strategy with a competitor to help them out, or whatever the case is. But on the other side, you got to think, okay, do I want to work with someone who has never worked with my product, has no idea what works, has no idea where to start, and it's just going to kind of be a guessing game from the jump? Or do I want to work with someone who has had success with this exact same product, knows how to find my audience, identify that audience, and convert that audience? So I kind of see both perspectives, but I've always leaned more towards it's definitely more beneficial to work with an agency that has experience in your niche and your product. And to address those concerns, what I would normally say is, there's a couple of different angles. One is, okay, if you literally have the exact same product and you're going after the exact same audience, what are the chances that either of those two brands is spending enough that they're competing for the same people within that market share? So for example, let's say that, we have chocolate whey protein 1 and chocolate whey protein 2. There's 2 billion people, just saying random numbers. There's a large amount of people that are taking whey protein every single day. If your advertising budget is $5,000, you should not be concerned about whether you're about to, oversaturate that market. There are plenty of customers out there for you, even if there's another brand that sells the exact same product and markets to the exact same type of people. I wouldn't be concerned that the agency is going to struggle to, find an audience for both, especially for something that's that common that many people use on a daily basis. That shouldn't necessarily be a concern. Now, if you are, for example, one of the biggest brands in the space and you're spending $20 million a month on advertising, maybe that's a little bit of a concern, because you are taking a big portion of that market share and you are actually competing directly with these brands who could impact your share of that market. With smaller, 99% of brands, I would say that's not necessarily a concern. And that's in the very rare scenario that the product and the demographic that they're going for are exactly the same. Usually what ends up happening is, even if it's the same product, because of the brand story that client is telling, or just because of the specific benefits of that product that they're highlighting, or minor differences in the formulation of that product, it's usually going to be two slightly different demographics or markets that require different strategies, require different platforms, require different ads. So for example, let's take the whey protein example again. Version 1 is, chocolate flavored, normal traditional whey protein that you and I have used 100 times. Version 2 is a whey protein isolate that comes in a strawberry flavor, and it's clear and it's more like a juice or a Gatorade. Those are going to have two different demographics. Without doing the research, just off the top of my head, I might say, okay, well, that traditional protein, that's going to be more for probably the male side, more, fitness junkies, muscle heads, that type of demographic. Whereas the clear one, we can probably market that really well to females and younger women and the kind of influencer fitness demographic who, they're going to be making videos with, and it might do better on a platform like TikTok, where it's a very visual platform that has direct access to that audience, whereas the traditional chocolate whey protein might do better on Facebook, where it has more access to a middle-aged male audience. So that's kind of the way that it usually pans out, is that minor differences with the branding or the product itself are going to lead, to those two products going after two different markets, having two different ad strategies and everything. So it's not usually an issue. Really, where the most overlap happens, and it's purely beneficial to the clients, is like we've discovered a really good tool on, working with one brand. So we're going to use that for all of our brands and things like that. But very rarely is it, this ad performed really well for this brand, let's duplicate it and run it for this one. We've even, you and I have had discussions explicitly making sure that we don't do that, where I've even said, hey, this ad looks a little bit similar to some stuff that we've run for this other client. Let's maybe just stay away from that just in case, so that we don't cross that line. So I think it's also a trust thing, but ultimately, the benefit of working with someone who has a ton of experience with similar products and similar industries and is actively in that market, learning what the trends are, learning what's working best on a daily basis is gonna outweigh the con of any possible, duplication of strategy or techniques or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. And I absolutely agree with you. Again, this is something that always comes to the question in terms of how the brand owner also perceives our opinion, right? And when it comes to really figuring out, again, you have to work with an agency who never worked with a similar product, or you want to work with an agency who has tons and tons of experience working with a similar product and getting the results in your similar space, right? So this is the really question that brand owners should be asking really thoughtfully to themselves that, hey, what's my answer going to be to this question, right? And of course, in terms of figuring out the strategy, every single brand is absolutely unique. Their brand story is unique. Their product positioning is unique. Even if the overlap happens, it's not that much that it's going to take the space of one or the other. And when it comes to like the strategy, the particular ad concept strategy, you see, when you open the ads library of your 10 most competitors, you would see a trend going on. If a trend is going on, for example, of us versus them format, that my product is this versus your product is this, you see all the brands are actually utilizing this format, similar to your Instagram algorithm, right? One music goes viral, their dance steps and hook steps goes viral. Now the algorithm is going to be supporting that particular music, those hook steps. And if you are a content creator, you create similar kind of videos, the chances of your videos getting viral increases rapidly. So if you work with an agency owner who worked in the similar space with the similar kind of products that you're working with, he already has the access to those strategies which are working in the market right now. He can actually use your muted talent.
Right. Yeah. Just agreeing. Like, you don't need to be in the ad account to see what someone's running like that.
Of course, you can just simply go to ads library. Yeah.
It's probably more likely that an agency that's assessing from the outside that isn't working with these clients is going to copy them than somebody who's managing them all, right? Because
of course,
we have control over whether or not we duplicate creatives across different clients and whatnot. If it's an agency that's just, coming in blind and their only reference is looking at these competitor ads, the ads library and whatnot, it's probably more likely that they're going to copy that because they're just looking for a starting point of it.
Yeah. And it's also more about the analytics, because on the surface level, you can only see what kind of ads are going. But on a much more deeper level, you will actually see the real data behind it. Like, how much money are we putting in? Are we actually testing those creatives that we tested out like from last 12 months? This is absolutely new. How are we scaling it? What kind of ROAS are we getting? For example, for one brand, a ROAS of 2x is more than sufficient. For one brand, a ROAS of 1x is sufficient. Right. If you actually try to copy the strategies from a brand who is actually, capable of just, surviving at 1x ROAS and they're keeping their ads running of one particular concept for a longer time, you just copy it and you need to get to it. You're going to get similar kind of results because of the copying stuff, right? You have to have some variation happening.
Yeah. And more often than not, I don't know if you've run into this, but I feel like it's the clients more so that are pushing us to copy other stuff. And so for example, a client will send me an ad that they saw somewhere from some brand and they'll say, I love this. We have to run this. And it always makes me laugh. And, my response without trying to be too catty is like, oh, how's it perform? Because they don't know, you know what I mean? And just because something looks good or you see another brand running it does not mean that it works or that it works for your goals and your strategy. A very real life example of that. I have a client and there was a particular brand that they kept sending me examples of. Oh, why aren't we running ads like this? How come I see it every single time I get on? They probably took on some sort of capital investment and they're pushing street awareness. They're not as concerned right they're not investment, which sometimes is the case, right? Different brands structured different ways, have different goals, and that changes the way that they approach budgeting and ad spend and what their targets on those campaigns are. So it's funny, after months and months and months of kind of going back and forth on that, a colleague of mine in the SEO space, that brand kind of came up and he was like, oh yeah, I worked with them for a long time. They took on an initial investment of $2 million and they burned through it all in the first year. They haven't profited anything. I'm like, wow. Exactly. Like you don't always know. Just because you see something everywhere doesn't mean that it's working. So that can't be your only reason for wanting to try something.
I can understand that. Again, and it's so contradicting as well if you think about it. Like, if these kind of conversations start coming from your end that, hey, this is a brand that is running this ad for a longer time, let's just copy it. the brand owner would be like, hey, why the hell am I paying the money to you if you would just copy other people's, strategies, right? You should come up with your own strategies. So again, these conflicting concepts keep happening from each other. And I also agree with, again, you don't know what you don't know. If a brand is spending so much amount of money, you don't know what their CPA goal is. Like some of the biggest brands I have worked with, they were also advertising on TV. And their wholesome goal was to just burn out 50K in a month.
Right.
Whether you get the results or no, they don't care about the CPA. Their product was about $30 to $50, ranging from different products. That was their average order value. Their CPA was $250, $500. They don't really care. They have to spend that 50K per month. Otherwise, they would be getting a call from the investor say, what the heck is happening, right? They also advertise on TV. So obviously, they're going to be having millions and millions of dollars investment, and they have to burn it through to actually get to the next month. Otherwise, their goals are not going to be met. Totally agree. Totally agree.
Differently, like we've worked with brands like Lacoste where, for example,
right,
a smaller brand, when they're approaching a Google ad campaign, they're probably looking at it and saying, okay, this is the ROAS that we need. These are the products that we want to sell. Whereas a brand of that size, they're looking at it and they're saying, okay, there's how many searches per month for a green t-shirt? How much do we need to spend to get every single one of those impressions? Okay, that's our budget for Google. They could care less about what the return is. They want every single person who types in green t-shirt to see their ad, and that's all they care about. It's a different level and it's a different approach, and you can't assume that what another brand is doing is going to fit your strategy or your goals.
Yeah, yep. You can't copy just other person's game without knowing their back-end strategy or back-end story, right? Again, so this is something that most of the e-commerce brands were really, really inclined towards doing. I think we had a good brainstorming over here. So yeah, my next question is going to be, again, one of the most popular questions. Like, this question is actually being asked by most of the brand owners while searching for an agency, while working with an agency. What are the most common mistakes e-commerce brand owners make while working with the agency? And what's the best way to go about it? So again, we have to address the mistakes you are making. So you, as an agency owner, have to address the mistakes brands are making while working with you. And what's the best way to resolve that? Or what's the best way to approach from a brand's perspective? I hope you got my question, because this is like a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah. So on the one hand, I think some of the biggest mistakes that I see brands making when they're trying to make that decision about an agency they're going to work with is, one, thinking that bigger is better, right? When it comes to the agency itself. And that is not always the case. And more often is the opposite, right? So we all know these massive agencies that have huge industry 500 clients, massive clients. They work with millions of dollars in monthly budget, and they're great. They have great teams, they have great people, and they have great strategies. The problem is you coming in as, health and wellness brand doing 50K a month revenue, 10K a month ad budget. You are not getting those team members. When you work with that agency, you're going to get sold by one of those team members. Your sales call is going to be with one of those team members. And then your onboarding call is going to be with the B team intern with 2 years of experience, because they do not care about that. And that's, it's unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. And it's a natural way for them to approach it. You're never going to convince an agency owner to allocate their best resources to their smallest accounts. It's just not going to happen. So if you feel like you might be one of those smaller brands, I would do the additional research and the additional searching to find an agency that is really good, but isn't too big to appreciate you and to treat you like one of their best clients and give you their best resources and give you the time of day and, actually have eyes from the top of the agency on the account on a daily basis. I think that that's one of the most important things. And we've tried to stay that way as an agency. We've tried to structure our agreements and everything in a way that makes sense for brands like that to work with us and for bigger brands to work with us. Our whole thing in kind of approaching these agreements is we want to structure something where if it's not working for you, it's not working for us either. And in other words, if you're not hitting your goals, we're not getting paid what we need to get paid either. And when you think about it that way and you structure the agreements that way, it also kind of, highlights another error that I think a lot of brands make, which is getting locked into long-term agreements. If you're an agency and you're approaching it from the standpoint of, hey, let's come up with something that only works for me if it works for you, you wouldn't want someone to still be a client if it's not working, right? Because you're not going to be making what you need to make to cover your expenses and come out profitably as an agency if you structured it properly. If you structure an agreement where, hey, you win, we win, you lose, we lose, then if you're losing, we're losing, and we don't want to lock you into something long term. We want you to be able to leave if that's what we both feel is the best decision for the brand. So again, one being thinking big is better and ending up being a small fish in a big pond. Two being, not necessarily understanding the approach that you should take with that agency and the performance basis that a good agency is normally willing to work on, right? If an agency is actually confident that they can grow your brand, there's no need to lock you in the long term. If you're having, success rate with that agency, you're probably not going to leave. And if you do want to leave, then it shouldn't be working for the agency either. Three would be working with an agency that doesn't fully understand the back end and the financial aspect of the business as a whole, rather than just surface level with the marketing. So for example, a big problem that a lot of brands run into a few months down the line when working with an agency is, let's say you're working with a paid ad agency, and that ad agency is charging you $5,000 a month in fees. Your Facebook ad budget is only $3,000 a month. And they're coming to you and saying, hey, look, we had a great month. You got a 2-to-1. They're looking at it and saying, hey, look, we spent 3,000, we got 6. This was great, right? But you're looking at it saying, okay, we spent 3,000 on ads. We spent 5,000 on the ad management. Of those sales, we spent another 2,000 on the product cost. So we just spent about 10K to get 6. So you need to work with an agency that sees it that way as well, or is at least willing to understand that and structure the agreement and the targets and the goals based on that full picture, rather than just what they're seeing in the ad account or what pertains to just the ad spend directly. And I think that that's something that's been a big benefit of launching our own brand too, is getting a real hands-on, daily look at what it is to be on the other side. And when those kind of discrepancies can happen where the agency thinks everything is going well, but everything is not necessarily going well for the brand. So that one can be, kind of overcome when you start working with the agency. As long as you feel good about the skills and the agreement and everything else, then, as you onboard, you can kind of make it clear what the financial picture looks like and what those expectations are. I think that that's just as important as finding the right agency, is making sure that you're aligned with them when you start working and that you're as transparent as you can be about what all of your costs are. And that's why we approach it the way that we do. When we onboard clients, the first thing that we do is we go through an in-depth financial analysis with them. So through that process, what we're looking to understand is a couple of different things. One, what is their goal as a business and their approach from a macro scale? Is this a business that you want to eat up as much market share as possible, you want to grow as many customers as possible, and you want to just show all these big numbers and this growth so that you can start getting ready for some sort of exit or an acquisition? Or is this something that you want to cash flow really well, you want to start profiting as soon as possible, you want it to be your personal primary income and, be able to take $10,000, $20,000 a month from it without, eating into the ad spend and all that kind of stuff? That's kind of the first thing, because that determines the approach that you're going to take to the brand moving forward. Is this a brand that just needs to acquire as many customers as possible, as low as a cost as possible? Or is this a brand that needs to hit a specific return on investment to ensure a certain level of monthly profitability? Understanding that, then you can kind of take another step forward to understand the micro and macro level expenses that they have. So what is their overhead? With all agency fees, with all tools that they're paying for, any employees that they have, any rent that they have, what is that base fixed overhead that's going to be there no matter how many sales they do? If they do 0 sales, their overhead is 5,000. If they do 20,000 in sales, their overhead is 5,000. So first is kind of understanding that number. Secondly, we look at a per unit or a per sale cost basis to understand, okay, well, the product is $25. We're selling it for $50. So we have a $25 margin. If we want to make a profit on that product, what's a realistic CPA that we think we can get? If we think we can get a $15 CPA, that's going to leave us about $10 of profit on every sale. And understanding that, okay, if there's $10 on average of profit with every sale when we're hitting our targets, how many of those $10 profit sales do we need to overcome that $5,000 overhead that we established first? And that's the part that a lot of agencies miss. They see that the unit profitability is there. Oh, our CPA is $10, the product costs $25, and we're charging $100. Like, we made profit there. But what they don't see is, yeah, but you only made 100 sales, so that wasn't enough to overcome that 5,000 plus your fee. You think we should be happy, but we're not. That seed starts to grow into the client leaves at 3 months. So I think that's probably the biggest thing when you start working with the agency is just establishing those metrics, understanding the full breadth of the financial picture, and being able to kind of align on what success actually is. They know if you should be happy. They're not surprised if you're upset, things like that. And you can kind of work towards a common goal.
Of course. And like really in depth, all the mistakes that you have explained. And again, and all this information can, an agency owner will only be able to figure out all this if he ever worked on the brand at the back end side or actually launched a brand, because you did something similar. Now you have two different perspectives of, hey, one as an agency owner of figuring out things, getting the most money. Two, as a business owner, if all these expenses actually make sense to you or no. And we're going to touch on three major mistakes that you mentioned over here pretty briefly, so that people can get a much better idea in terms of what they're looking into, right? Some of the following questions that I have on my list, you have already briefly touched upon that, but we're going to expand on those a bit more, just so that e-com brands can get a bit more clarity on that, right? So the first thing that you mentioned was you being a small fish in a big pond, right? You working with a big agency, you won't be getting that A-team players, because from an agency owner's point of view as well, if you see, you have to understand these concepts for the e-commerce brand owners. They also have to make the sense of the cost, because for the A-team players, they're paying a salary of 10K a month. For the smaller players, they're actually paying a salary of maybe 3K or 5K, or some interns probably like 1K or 2K. So if you are coming as a short brand with a short budget, and you have like a small retainer, which is not going to make a significant impact on their overall agency revenue, why would they allot you some big A players? So this actually makes a lot of sense, and you have to make that sense in your own mind before choosing an agency as well. Because as factual as it can be, one thing can be you just put some kind of a cloth on your eye and just be unaware of this fact. Or two, you can actually realize what is happening within the industry, make your decision accordingly, and choose some specialized agencies. Because I think the market slowly, because what A-team players are going to do is, once they graduate to a certain level, they're going to start their own mini businesses.
Right.
Just like you're there. Right. So that's what the future is. The future, as per Naval Ravikant also predicts, is going to be like small teams of 5 to 10 people really specialized in doing something significant for one particular industry and crushing it. Right. The big corporations are going to collapse because they have big budgets to pay the huge salaries. You see Google employees, I think they are the most laziest people on the planet, because they have so many amenities available in the office. They don't give a shit, right? They're getting sleep, they're getting entertainment, they're getting fed. Why would they give a shit in developing a program? They just want to retain their jobs, retain their big packages. They don't give shit about the clients, right? You have seen people working with Facebook reps, Google reps. These are all similar kind of people, right? They give you the advice that really doesn't make any kind of sense. Yeah, fucks up the budget. Sometimes they even give you some budget, right? 2K, 3K to test out some new strategy that they recently rolled out, giving you a Facebook rep. You start working with them out, and next thing that you know, after the month, you actually spent their budget, which was like 2K, 3K, but also fucked up your entire strategy, which would have led you to getting some lower CACs if you have worked with a more specialized agency. Totally agreed, bro. Second thing, we all know which agency are we talking about. Some big agencies who are actually locking people in for like 10 months, 12 months, 16 months. Now, also they have two perspectives. The first perspective could be agency does not want to reveal the strategies they are actually implementing on the brands, because this is something that they figured out very cautiously. They just don't want that, hey, if a brand works with me for like 3 months, learns the strategy and leave. Now, that's a perspective coming from an agency point of view, right? Because now you're working in a very specialized niche that most people don't have the knowledge to work in, right? On the other hand, brand feels like, hey, I'm just locked in for like 12 months. I might be getting a special treatment. I might be getting a specialized strategy that no one knows about. But then once we start auditing these ad accounts, the story is absolutely different. Right. So one big agency, now the agency who shall not be named, I audited like 3 of their ad accounts, absolute shit performance, less than 1 ROAS, have a really big brand, have really big brands working with them. Their revenues are like more than $2 million of revenue. Listed companies, their revenue is not good. Like their ROAS is not good. And the founder is saying like, hey, even if I turn off the Facebook ads for a month, my revenue is not affected.
Because they're just hitting fast customers and not even doing it.
Of course, man. Like, you actually coming from a brand owner's perspective that, hey, I shut off the ads for 1 month, saved on the agency fee, saved on the ad spend. My revenue did not affect. What the heck is happening, right? So agency owner starts scratching his head, trying to figure out what new agencies are actually over there in the market that can actually help you out. So what are your comments on these agencies who are, I would not say manipulating brands, because they also have some kind of specialized knowledge. They also have some specialized tools that smaller agencies might or might not have. We don't know the picture. But when we worked with these brands actually got results. Similar brands worked with us, smaller retainers, not even that big retainers, no long-term commitments, worked with us. We're working on a similar project together. This brand has stuck with us for more than 16 to 18 months, right? I think it's got to be 18 months now.
No, it's more than, they started May 2022. So it's over 2 years.
Over 2 years. Fuck, man. I think they started running ads like after 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
That's when I came into the picture. Before that, you might be doing website development for them.
Right. Yeah, we were doing website affiliates and email, and then
doing
ads in November of 2022.
You see how beautiful is that? Like, they were doing around $165,000, maybe less than that. Now they are consistently doing $400,000, $500,000.
Right. And
we built their ad account from scratch. Right. We built the pixel.
So
right.
And that's, like you said, it's just the way it is sometimes. These bigger agencies, it's not always better. And, to come back to the question of, how do I feel about those long-term commitments and that kind of thing? It's, from the agency perspective, part of me gets it, right? Because, clients always say, oh, I've been burned by a million agencies. I promise you, we've been burned by a million clients. So I totally understand that. And, some of those situations might be, like you said, where they watch what we're doing for a month. They think they can hire somebody internally to take over the ad account or whatever it is for a cheaper rate, whatever. And we lost out. Another scenario might be that, and I think this is more common, that the client is maybe just hard-headed in the sense that we're trying to make them understand these financial, aspects of the business and why, for example, it's okay that we're acquiring customers at a 1.75 because with their margins, that's profitable and their retention rate is 25% month over month. So they have an opportunity to build a massive base of recurring customers. There can be some sort of misalignment on something that we know to be true and we just can't get through to them. And so they leave. So more often than not, I think we've only had in our 3 to 4 years of operation, we've only had like 1 or 2 clients leave because they were unsatisfied with performance. In most other scenarios, it's something that's completely out of your control, right? I had a client that the business was supporting the majority of her personal expenses. She had a baby and like that threw a curveball into everything. And she basically like decided to stop running ads. I had a client who, these are both within the last few months. So this is not super uncommon. I had a client where we were crushing it for. He had a big presence personally on social media that we were leveraging to drive sales for a supplement brand that he had launched. And so he literally did over $100,000 his first month with $0 in ad spend, just off pure organic chat automation funnels and things like that. Month 2, he gets onto a fake call with an influencer agency without us being involved. And one thing leads to another. He gets all of his social media accounts stolen. And so now we're not working with him anymore. And it's just things like that that constantly kind of come up in the agency world where it's like, all right, that was completely out of my control. There's nothing I could have done differently. And yet I'm still sitting here twiddling my thumbs with no retainer because it did happen. So I can understand the desire to want to lock people into long-term contracts to try to protect yourself from, events like that. But then my question is, so then what? Like, how does the client pay that next invoice and not even, that they don't even have a business anymore? How are they supposed to pay that? And if they don't pay that, are you realistically going to go through the process and the cost of taking them to court for $5,000? No, you're not. So those agreements more often than not don't mean anything, and they just make it uncomfortable and they diminish the confidence that the client has in your ability. Because there's also situations, and this is now the flip side of the coin, like the agency that you were just talking about, where I know for a fact their pure motivation for locking people into 12-month contracts is because they know they're not going to perform. they know that the client's going to be upset within 30 to 45 days because they're not performing, because they haven't figured out how to, consistently perform. And so they're protecting themselves from their own performance and the damage that they're going to do. So there's definitely both situations. But again, even in the situation where you're just trying to mitigate your risk, is it really going to do that? No, because you're not taking anyone to court over a marketing contract. That money is going to be lost ultimately if the client decides that they want to stop paying you or they want to disappear and not work with you. Secondly, and maybe this is more of just a personal thing, I'm too anxious of a person to keep working with a client that hates me. So if they're ready to leave and it's not working out and the calls are just uncomfortable and it's just constant butting heads and coming up with excuses, and I'm not doing that. If it's not working out, wish you the best. Hopefully you can find an agency or some sort of solution that's going to accomplish what you're looking to accomplish. And hopefully I can fill that time with something that's less stressful and more productive and somebody that I can actually help. So I think that's more just a personal thing. Maybe not all agency owners feel that way. Their mindset might just be, hey, look, we signed this client. We need to get as much as we possibly can from them, regardless of how it goes. But I just don't even enjoy doing that. I just feel stressed all the time in the situation. So if it's not working, I would rather than be able to leave. No, right. Be fair, and you want to be able to protect yourself. So we normally just say, hey, look, we just need 30 days written notice. And that's realistically just because in most scenarios, let's say the invoice is due on the 1st. I can't tell my employees and contractors that are working on that business with like less than 5 days notice that they're not going to get paid that following month. So it's more so for me to just be able to do right by the people that I have working on the account. I just need 30 days notice to be able to tell them, hey, look, this is going to be the last time that I'm able to pay you for this account specifically, or maybe we have certain tools that we're only using on certain accounts that need to be canceled by a certain time. But that's really the only scenario and the only kind of notice that I'll require.
Yeah, of course, man. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense right now. Again, like everything that you mentioned over here is on point. And again, brand owners should be, or I would say, diligent enough to be able to understand this perspective that is coming from your side. And agency owners should also understand, because we both have encountered some similar scenario while working in our previous agency, where one of the brands we were managing, they went out of business because now they were not getting returns that they were expecting, even though from a performance side of point, they were getting the best cost per lead, under $15, under $10, as per the industry standard, they were getting the best. Right. But again, that overall invoice that they were paying to the agency was so big that they had to literally declare the business as bankrupt, start something new. And then they approached me in a different manner. And that's on me that I actually refused to work with them, because I was already engaged with the agency that I'm working in. So I have some written contracts with them. And it's just not ethically good, right? You also have to sometimes make the relationships. Some relationships should let go in order to maintain the more profitable and businessful one, right? Of course. So one thing would have been, I would have started working with them for much less retainer, but then they can also screw me up after 2 months saying, hey, that I'm not going to pay you. Right. Another thing would be, I can just simply avoid them. Tell them to my founders, tell them to the company that I'm working for that, hey, this is something that happened, and say that, hey, I won't be able to participate in this, right? My loyalty lies with you. And it's like, I think we both have worked with a couple of projects together, and you would have never seen me approaching one of your clients that left you, or you approaching one of my clients that I referred to you and left, right? We don't do that. We don't snitch on each other, right? It's like the bro code that happens.
Yeah, we had one recently that we're working on together right now that he reached out to me, and then I told him, like, Jasmine will have to be involved with this because,
of course,
he met you first.
Yeah, that's the bro code you should. And that's where the more business happens that way only. You can like snitch one person for one time or two time. Right. What about the long-term relationship you're going to maintain for the next two? I think we are working on projects for like last 2 years now.
Yeah. And that's not counting like when we worked together. But...
Yeah, when we worked together with one more company, right?
Yeah. So again, things we're working on like 7 or 8 together at once.
Of course. So again, these were the relationships we were able to maintain with each other, because again, we were ethically good. The loyalty lies with each other, and we are just working at a long-term business. This is not a short-term gig that we're performing. Right. This is how we earn our day-to-day bread and butter. Of course, man. So yeah, we literally answered a good amount of questions. My third thing is going to be you actually helping a brand understand about the expectations they're coming with, and you trying to help them understand, hey, what's going to be the reality. So how do you actually manage the expectation of a client who has one expectation and the reality is like completely different? And you have to handle that situation as well and make sure the client understands for its own benefit, even if they don't work with you. And even if they are working with you, after 2 to 3 months, they have some other expectation and you have to make them understand that, hey, this is the ground reality. Even if you don't work with me, you're going to encounter similar kind of scenario. How do you manage these situations, right?
Yeah, so I think that that's something that is difficult for a lot of agency owners and marketers to kind of develop the skill of being able to establish those expectations, especially when they're not aligned and you maybe have to push back. I think a lot of people early in their career, if they're freelancers or agency owners, a lot of times they'll just kind of let that go by, you know, on those initial conversations. If the client says something that they know to be unrealistic or that they know is going to be a challenge to meet, maybe they don't push back because they don't want to risk losing that client or seem like they're just not capable of reaching those expectations.
Right.
But I think once you develop the level of confidence to be able to, like, you know, you truly know that something's unrealistic, you know that you're not just saying it because it's not capable for you. It becomes a little easier to have those conversations. And also, I mean, again, it comes back to maybe this is a personal thing, but I just don't want to, I have no desire to be in a situation a month and a half down the road where the client is upset because expectations were misaligned. So I'm willing to push back on those unrealistic expectations in the beginning at the risk of losing the client, because again, to me, if we were never be able to align on those expectations, then it wasn't going to work anyway. So we might as well just save each other both the time and the headache now and understand that. So, you know, I think the most common expectation that both of us know is unrealistic is ROAS, right? And somebody will say, oh, I had a client, you know, a month ago, so I need a 5-to-1.
Right.
Oh, okay, perfect. Let me turn the knob and, you know, be on a 5-to-1. So that's probably the one that we run into the most. And for me, the solution to that conversation was to say, okay, why is it exactly that you think that you need a 5-to-1 for the business to be successful? And so in having that conversation, I realized that this was not an efficiency problem. It was not a ROAS problem. This was a volume problem. And what I mean by that was, if this was an efficiency problem and we needed a higher ROAS, it would be because on each purchase, we're not generating enough profit, right? We're selling the product for $125. It costs us $75 and we're getting a $50 CPA. We're losing $25, right? That's a ROAS problem. That's an ad efficiency problem. But let's say that we're generating a $25 profit on every single purchase and the business is still not making a profit. That's a volume problem. You're not doing enough of those profitable purchases to overcome your fixed overhead expense. Again, kind of coming back to what we talked about earlier.
Right.
So when I broke it down to her like that, where it's like, okay, look, let's say your business expenses are $10 and your ad budget right now is $2 and you're getting a 2.5, which historically we know for this product, this industry, your brand is really good. You're getting a 2.5. So in total revenue off of those ads, you're making $4,500. Obviously with ad spend plus your overhead plus product costs, you're extremely negative, even though the ad performance is good. It's unrealistic to say, okay, we're going to spend $2,000 now at a 5-to-1 and get a 10-to-1. That's one way mathematically that you could overcome that overhead, right? Okay, we need, instead of a 2.5, we need to make that 5. That's not realistic. So if we still want to make that happen, what is the realistic path of overcoming that $10,000 overhead? It's continuing to get a 2.5, but instead spending $5,000. Now you're generating $12,500 in revenue at a ROAS that we know is attainable, we know is realistic because we've done it now. So it's two different ways to get to the point of profitability. One way is improving the ROAS to a 5-to-1, which we've established is unrealistic. The other way is improving the scale and the volume to maintaining our current ROAS, but at a higher ad spend, which we know is realistic. And we think that we can probably reach that point in 45 to 60 days or whatever is realistic, you know, for the scenario. So I think just breaking it down into black and white plain numbers for the client and explaining why those expectations may not be realistic, and instead offering a different path to meet the goal that they're, you know, ultimately trying to get to, is a good way to approach it. You know, if I were to just say, oh, Carly, we can't do that, we'll never get a 5-to-1, then she gets off of that conversation thinking, in this guy's eyes, there's no way my business can be profitable. But instead, I offer an alternate path to getting to that same point that she wants to get to. So instead, she's hopping off the call saying, oh, okay, it's not a 5-to-1 I need. It's more, I need to provide more UGC and more ad creative so that we can scale this budget to the point where a 2.5 puts my business in the green. Does that make sense?
Right. Of course, man. Of course. Like, well put. Well put. And again, most of the agency owners make this mistake of, hey, coming straight off the bat that, hey, we can do this or we can't do this. Like, this is not black or white. This is like a gray area that you really need to dig deep into. And sometimes some simple mathematical calculations will make things much more easier for you than just, some of the agencies, what they do is they come up with some hypothetical projections for like next 3 months, next 7 months. I believe all the hypothetical projections are absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
You can't predict what's going to happen in the market in the next 2 to 3 months because the market keeps changing. If one strategy worked for the last 6 months for you, it does not mean it's going to continue to work for the next 6 months. Market's going to change, right? That's where the customer that's where the business owner should understand that, hey, really need to sit down with the advertiser, with an agency owner who has this similar experience of working on their own brands, because you are running on your own brand, I'm running my own brand. And here in India, with all the problems that are present in any e-commerce business, we tackle one more issue, which is cash on delivery. So if you work in USA, you are getting paid first, then your product ships out. Our product ships out first, and then we get paid. So we have to manage that cycle as well. And we have to also manage the delivery rates, right? So last month, I think I made a post on LinkedIn yesterday. I did about $41,000 in my business, spent about $6,400, ROAS for 6.33. Now, some people would say that, hey, what the hell, this ROAS is pretty good. But you see, you also have to calculate the factor that, hey, this is going to be a cash on delivery, and I'm going to receive around at least 30 to 40% RTA on that.
Right.
So the margins, like, you end up at a ROAS of 3x only, right? So again, some people are actually showing different results from different market and actually manipulating the overall perception they have. For example, if you are going to be advertising in a country where the currency is like cheapo, similar to what used to happen on YouTube, they used to reveal their YouTube earnings, but the currency was like American peso or something, and the dollar signs used to come and they're saying that, hey, last month we made about $5 million. But that used to translate in USD around $100,000 or something. So you have to be spectacle. You have to be really, I would say, cautious when choosing an agency from a market because all people can do is like spend in one market, change the currency of another market, and show you manipulative results. You have to be cautious from them. So if you're approaching an agency, you also have to see like in which market are they advertising their ads to. So that what all makes the difference, right? Yeah, I think we covered all this basic approach, but one of the major questions I had was pricing. We discussed on pricing a bit, we touched a bit. Again, you can't be spending 5K on agency if you're only spending about 3K on ads. It's not going to make sense to you. Now, there's like two perspectives involved. The first perspective is going to be all the initial businesses when you're launching takes a setup fee. Takes the time to set up your business assets like website, your creatives, your landing pages, your ads and stuff. If you do a product shoot today, it's going to cost you like $2,000. But those product photos are going to be utilized for the rest of the year in different ad creatives through different videos. Again, that is one perspective. If you hire a full-fledged e-commerce servicing agency where your budget is initially low, but the deliverables that they're providing are really, really high and your overall invoice becomes bigger, you have to understand the business owner's mindset as well that, hey, I might be losing some few bucks on the first 2 or 3 months, but they're going to cover up for the rest of the year. Coming next 6 months to 12 months are going to become easier. So what should be the exact pricing model that should become a win-win situation for both brand and the agency owner? You two sitting together, finding a common ground that should make both the parties happy. What do you think should be the exact pricing strategy as per you? What's your pricing strategy when you work in the market for other brands? And how do you explain this stuff to the brands and other agency owners, right? I hope you understand the question.
Yeah, of course. So I think me being operating the way that we do, doing the kind of growth partner approach where we're looking to take on any and every channel that you currently have that we genuinely think can lead to growth in your business and that we can bring value to, right? So we have a lot of control in those situations where, if we're taking over paid ads, we're taking over conversion rate optimization, we're taking over email, we have a pretty good amount of control over, the omni-channel approach and the growth of the store. Whereas let's say an agency only does Facebook ads, or they only do email marketing. They don't have a ton of control or influence over the overall growth of that store because there's a lot of things that need to happen that they're not, directly managing. And maybe the client's doing a good job of that. Maybe their other teams are doing a good job of that, or maybe they're not. So me having that level of control, I'm able to confidently put together a lot more performance-based and flexible packages, right? Because let's say that I've audited the client's account, and I've determined that they're going to need these 5 services ultimately to grow to the highest level. And I'll usually prioritize them too for the client so they know, okay, well, this is the most impactful, this is the least impactful, but everything in combination is what's going to get me to where I need to go. So I'll kind of recommend those services. And then from my perspective, I need to understand, all right, what is it going to actually cost me in terms of hard expenses to run this account? Sometimes I'll take into account, expenses that are going to be there regardless. So for example, maybe I have an account manager on salary, and whether he takes on this account or not, I'm paying them the same amount month over month. Sometimes I'll take that into account, but usually I'm more so looking at, okay, I take on this account, I also take on these 3 additional expenses, and I kind of consider that my cost. So, maybe it's an account where I'm going to contract you out for the paid ads, and I need to take your fee into account to make sure, okay, well, I at least need to have that covered. Once I understand what my costs are going to be, then I'll kind of structure a few different packages for that client. And it does vary client to client for sure, based on my level of confidence in them to do what they need to do to sustain the business, develop good products, handle customer service, all that kind of stuff. My level of confidence in the product or the business itself and the industry and just the pure market opportunity. And any quick wins that the business might present. Maybe they're doing a really good job on paid ads, but they literally don't have email automations. And I know, okay, very quick fix, this is going to boost their revenue immediately. So I take all of those things into consideration to develop these packages. And it's usually, hey, look, these are the services we want to do, and here's 3 different ways that you can pay for them. So the first way might be, look, this is just traditional flat retainer. You're going to pay us 10 grand a month. We're going to handle every single one of your services. It's month to month. You can leave whenever you want. Option 2 might be, okay, look, you're going to pay us a $7,500 retainer and 10% of the additional revenue that we drive to your store. And then the third option might be an even lower retainer. Hey, look, you're only going to pay a $5,000 retainer, but you're going to pay us 15% of the growth of your store. It's 3 different ways for them to get all of the services that we think are necessary for them to grow, and to kind of find a way of structuring that compensation that makes the most sense for their business. So, one issue, and I tell brands this straight up, I'm like, look, if you go with this performance-based option where you're paying $5,000 a month and 15% of gross sales, let's say that we very quickly grow you to $100,000 a month. Are you still going to be happy that you're paying $20K? Or are you going to wish that you took that flat retainer of 10? Because that's one scenario where I'll be like, look, I'm not going to lock you anything the long term, but what we're not going to do is in 3 months, when that percentage passes what the original retainer would have been, we just go to the original retainer. So if you agree to this percentage model, that means even when we start crushing it, you have to stick with this model. So that's one thing that I'm kind of a stickler on, but it gives them the opportunity. Most brands end up taking the lower retainer and the percentage for a couple of reasons. One, it helps them with cash flow. And that's something that I like about it too, because I know that we've freed up additional budget for them to commit towards paid ad spend, which is ultimately going to grow them quicker, help us get into that percentage a little bit sooner. It frees up capital for them in the beginning by not having to commit such a large amount to that initial retainer in the first few months. Secondly, it puts us on the same page about where we want to go and how we want to grow the store. And I feel like when we're a little bit more invested from a financial standpoint, I've seen the client be a lot more willing to listen to what I'm saying and implement the ideas that I'm suggesting, because they know I'm coming from a point where this guy needs the store to grow also, or he's pretty much just breaking even on the account. So they know that I'm approaching it from that standpoint, that I'm basically treating it as I would my own business, because I need it to grow just as much as they do for me to make money the same way that they do. So it really kind of creates a better working relationship because I feel like we're on the same page. And when I'm suggesting certain things, they know that I'm not just trying to like sound good on a call and make it to the next week or whatever. They know that I'm actually trying to grow.
Right.
It also, kind of goes back to that small versus big agency model. When we structure these type of contracts, you better believe that like my eyes are on that account. It doesn't matter how small that retainer is. If we have the opportunity to get 15% of the sales, even if I'm not the one directly managing it, which a lot of those scenarios I'm the one on the client calls and everything. But even if I'm not, I'm definitely meeting with that account manager almost every single day. I'm looking at that account, I'm looking at sales because again, it's a big opportunity for us. And until we're able to grow it, we're either taking a small loss or just breaking even and kind of turning our wheels. So that's the way I approach it. But I definitely see how, somebody who maybe just runs one channel or another can't be as flexible because they don't have as much control over whether or not the store grows. So they just need to get paid for doing what they do regardless of how it translates.
Yeah, of course, man. Like, well put. Again, in terms of figuring out a common ground, it really makes sense for the brand owner and the agency owner to sit down and figure out, again, what exactly it's going to be. Whether it's going to be like, shelling out a few dollars right now or shelling out big bucks later on. But my question is going to be like, how do you hold these brands accountable when the brand grows up to 100K, 200K, and your fee actually becomes about 30K to 50K? Is it ever happened to you, or like how you handle these situations in the previous years that you worked with brands?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things, and luckily this wasn't the agency that I owned, but an agency that I worked at in the past, we ran into a scenario where the percentage had gotten so high that when the brand left, they walked away from like a $250,000 invoice. And it was never recovered. Again, because you're not, in most scenarios, the cost of taking someone to court over something like that, and if they're at that level, they have more resources than you do. Their legal team is going to be better. Everything, it just doesn't make sense. So it's just one of those things that you kind of have to put a little bit of faith in, try your best to build that relationship with the client. You also have to kind of understand, like, at a certain point, you may have to call their bluff. You're the agency that got them to this point. Are they really confident that they can replicate those results with somebody else, or that they can build their own internal team, or whatever the case is? And to be quite honest, I have to be, honest with myself in these situations too sometimes. If we're just running paid ads and doing email and CRO and somebody's paying us 60 grand a month, I understand the tension that that's putting on them. And I know that they're going to be in a situation every single day where they're looking at that number saying, could I get this cheaper? So you kind of have to understand that as well, and be reasonable about it, and sometimes be flexible to keep the client. They might come to you and say, hey, look, we love working with you guys. I can't continue to justify paying, 12 times what I could go restart with another agency at, or whatever the case is. Obviously, I'm more confident in your ability to work, but how can we make this make sense? Can we, lower that or put a cap on it? And sometimes, because I've found myself in those situations, now at the beginning, when we structure those percentage type of deals, I might say it's going to be 15% of revenue, but the invoice caps out at 15K. So even if you're doing $1 million a month in sales, your invoice will never be more than 15K or something reasonable. You know what I mean? Something
makes sense to both of you.
And I'll ask them the question: hey, if you were doing 200, or if you were doing $2 million a month in sales, would you ever care that you were paying us $20,000 a month? If they say no, I would love for that scenario to happen. Okay, cool. Then we'll cap it at $20,000 a month at 1% of revenue or whatever the case is. You know what I mean? We'll make it make sense. And that's just something through trial and error, finding yourselves in uncomfortable situations and having to kind of feel, okay, how could I have avoided this but still protected myself and all that kind of stuff. But I think we're getting closer, and that performance-based model, I think, is definitely the future and what brands are really going to be kind of active forward.
Of course, man, of course. Makes sense again. The whole point of actually discussing the common ground between you and brand is to, continue towards a long-term partnership and not lose each other, because you both need each other to, survive, right, to thrive, and to actually grow further. Because if you put in your faith, the agency owner puts in the faith, that's where the magic happens. Right. Makes sense.
And I mean, there's another layer to that is when the opportunity presents itself, we've also taken your equity deals. So maybe a situation where they really don't have a lot of budget, if
Right.
you're paying an agency, they may not have enough money for the actual marketing and stuff like that. So if that scenario approaches and I feel really confident in the product, I might tell them, okay, don't pay us any retainer. We are going to own 20% of the business on paper.
Of course.
So we've taken
Yeah.
equity portions of brands too, if we're really confident in it. And I think that in combination with like the percentage of revenue is something most agencies, if they do kind of the more omni-channel model, are moving towards.
Yeah, of course, man. It actually, if you have some skin in the game, that's where you can also thrive with your own team. And you can also see that, hey, I own portion of multiple businesses and I'm also going to be a bit more secured, right? Yeah, makes sense, bro. Makes sense. And that actually wraps up our first session towards all the agency-related questions I have on my list for the e-commerce brand owners over there. I think this was pretty intense. What do you think about it?
Yeah. This was good. I think we went a lot longer than we anticipated, but
Yeah,
I don't know how you feel, but we can always do like a part 2
of course.
on like the more like my internal brand building process.
Of course, man. That's what I was actually coming towards, to actually wrap this up and not make it too lengthy, for the viewers to consume that they would be like too much overwhelmed with all the information just coming their way, flying over here and there, right? So let's plan for a part 2 where we can discuss in depth more about your brand building process, how you started, what kind of challenges you are encountering, and how the brand is doing right now. So just to wrap up, I would say if you can help out with some last few words of wise advice to agency owners who are actually trying to get more clients, trying to figure out their unique positioning within the competitive space of agency owners, and what they can do the best to maintain their relationships and hold the relationships for a longer period of time. For example, we are working with a brand for more than 2 years now. They must be getting something in return. There must be some good communication happening at the back end. There must be some good result, being delivered to them. That's why they're sticking around with us. If they wouldn't have been getting all this stuff, a good brand leaves in about 2 to 3 months after getting fed up from an agency, right? So I believe if a brand is sticking with you for more than 4 to 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, and 12 months, and 16 months, and 2 years, they are getting some good service, right?
Yeah.
Give your wise advice to these agency owners who are just trying to figure out their way in this competitive market.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about just being as genuine and transparent as you can. I think something that our clients really appreciate about us, especially the ones that have been around for a long time, is that level of honesty. And, that starts from the very beginning of onboarding the client and selling them right, and kind of understanding those expectations, putting yourself in the position of being the brand owner. What might they be looking for? What might, concerns might they have? How can you honestly address those concerns and, be realistic about what they should expect in working with you, and push back when, expectations are not aligned. And I think it's just, also being honest about when things aren't working. For me, I feel like the conversations have always gone better, rather than coming in with some like preloaded bullshit excuse of, oh, there's a bug with Facebook and CPAs have been 2 times as high. We've heard it all. You know what I mean? Come in from the approach of, if you genuinely don't know yet, you don't know why performance has been down the last week, just say that. Hey, we're not 100% sure what has affected the performance over the last week or so. We didn't change anything with our budgets or our bid strategies. We've launched a couple of new creatives, but those are actually doing well. It's the older ones that kind of fell off. It could be this, it could be that. So we're investigating it, and something that we're going to be implementing over the next couple of days is we're going to be changing this. Like, the client would much rather hear about how you're actively doing things to solve the problem than some sort of excuse about why the problem occurred in the first place that we both know probably isn't true, right? So
Right.
I think that just maintaining that level of transparency and being genuine and honest in those interactions, especially when things aren't going well, buys you a lot of respect and trust from those clients, because now when you tell them things are going well, or that you have, hopes for a campaign that you just launched or something like that, they're more likely to believe it, because they know that if it wasn't going well, you would just say that and you would be honest with them. So I think that creates an environment where when challenges arise, you and the client are solving them together, and they start to approach it that way as well. Whereas if it's always them kind of asking you about the problem and you try to like back into a corner and defend yourself,
Right.
that's how it's always going to be. They're going to approach every issue of, okay, what is Tyler doing to solve this? Or what did Tyler do to cause this? Instead of, oh shit, we have this issue. I need to talk to Tyler about it to see how we can figure this out. So I think, maintaining the honesty and the transparency lends itself to healthier conversations when challenges arise, and obviously healthier conversations when times are hard is going to keep you from losing clients and allow you to maintain them over a lot longer duration. And again, just being honest with yourself. If you're not able to figure something out, if it's a product that you're working on for the first time and you just cannot figure it out, and your ads team can't figure it out, and you've been turning your wheels for 2 months and the client is upset, sometimes you just got to be honest about that too, and let them know, hey, we're having some real problems figuring this out. We're actively looking for solutions, but not always trying to act like you always have it figured out. Sometimes you don't have it figured out. It's okay to say that, and it's okay to, if it's right for that client to leave, to just let them know that you're struggling, and if they decide to leave, they leave, and you find something that you're better at to work on, and just kind of keep it moving. So I think it's just, the easiest way to say it is just cut the bullshit, cut the random excuses, cut the lying to yourself about why things aren't working. If you're always trying to come up with an excuse, then that's where your mind is going to start going automatically from the jump, rather than going straight to trying to find a solution. So, I think we've all been around marketers or worked in agencies where if the ads aren't working, the media buyer is immediately saying, oh, well, they put the wrong ingredient in the product. No wonder no one worked up right. But like, they're looking for that excuse rather than looking for like how they can just do whatever's in their control to solve the problem. So I think just, showing the client that you're always looking for a solution is a good way to kind of keep things steady, even when maybe the performance isn't there.
Yeah, of course, man. Absolutely agreed on whatever you shared over here, right? In terms of, making an honest communication with the client, because that's what's going to make or break your relationship.
Yeah.
If you can't just be truthful about, again, if you keep making excuses, the client is going to figure out one day or the other, right? You can't just linger upon one excuse over like next 2 months. People know people, right?
Yeah. And again,
people know
it's going to have a net negative effect, because once they realize that, okay, no matter what's going on, this guy's always going to act like it's all good, then they're always going to wonder if it's actually good when you say it's good. You know what I mean? They're going to be, that's when they start looking at things they don't understand, because they're trying to find what you're hiding. You know what I mean? And they start throwing random things at you that don't make sense. Like, oh, we saw that you're not doing any targeting on this ad set. And we're like, yeah, like, you should be going broad with this type, because they're just looking for the reason that it's not working, because you're not giving it to them. So that's where you kind of get into those uncomfortable situations.
Right. You have to approach the client with the problem that is happening before the client approaches.
Right, exactly.
Right. Not, again, this is something that, agency owners should be careful about. And again, like, I think this was a really good discussion with all the agency stuff that we just discussed. And it's going to be like beneficial for brand owners, which was the primary target of the video, but also for the agency owners as well, because, they can also learn from the conversation that happened today. And of course, you should be definitely waiting for the next line of questioning we're going to be having from Tyler in terms of how he launched his brand and what more advice he can give to e-commerce brand owners and agency owners who are willing to start their own brand. But that's going to happen in part 2. Tyler, when are you available?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm available pretty much same time any morning this week. We can hop on and
that's the spirit, bro.
And I would say, I mean, for anybody watching these videos, if you find this type of content interesting or helpful, definitely be on the lookout for everything else that we're working on. Obviously Jasmeet and I both provide, marketing and e-commerce growth services, but we're also working on developing an expert community of brand owners, marketers, e-commerce service providers, fulfillment agencies, stuff like that. To be able to have these type of conversations on the daily and kind of bounce ideas off of, people in a similar mindset and stage in life. And we're also going to be adding in some bonus value in there. You'll be able to, schedule calls directly with myself to get a consultation on your brand. You'll have direct chat access to all of my team and experts to answer any of your marketing questions within a 24-hour time frame, and lots of other cool stuff like that, free downloads. So keep a lookout for that. We'll be dropping more details on that for anybody who's interested. And, that's the type of stuff as a marketer that's really going to take you to the next level, is just, constantly exposing yourself to more ideas, more strategies, figuring out how to implement them, and staying kind of at the edge of that information.
Yeah, of course, man. Like, you understand the concept of the top idea in your mind, right?
Right.
The top idea on your mind is going to be like, the thing that you're always thinking about, even when you're in a shower, even when you're riding your car, your bike, you're doing whatever. the top idea in your mind should always be about e-commerce growth strategy. If you're a marketer working in the e-commerce field, that's what's going to make or break your entire career. Exactly. So I think, of course, like we are developing this new community where all the e-commerce brand owners, agency owners are going to be there. So if you're an agency owner who's looking to get quality clients and get more information about how we are getting quality clients for ourselves, you should join that. If you're an e-commerce brand owner who's actually on the lookout for some e-commerce strategy that we are implementing on our own brands, like we're both managing 6-figure brands, you should be on that group. So we're developing that one. Once that is like officially rolled out, we're going to be making that access public, and you can enroll that and, surround yourself with like-minded people who are actually putting in the work, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
All right, back.
Man, I appreciate this. This was fun, and just let me know again. We'll do part 2 later this week and get them both uploaded as quick as possible.
Of course, man. So the part 1 is going to be rolled out like this week only, and for the part 2, stay tuned for the next week, and we're going to be rolling out that too. So yeah, man, thank you so much for jumping on the call. I think we have given good amount of time over here discussing some really important questions and giving out the knowledge we had for the e-commerce brand owners and agency owners today. So thank you so much. Have a good evening, bro. And, let's keep crushing together. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, brother. Talk soon.